All right, everyone. Welcome to this webinar by pimvendors.com. I'm Stefan Spijkers. I'm the co-founder of pimvendors.com. And as a consultant on the product data in our client spaces, we also help companies with their whole product data architecture. And that product data architecture lives inside your organization, but also often outside of your organization. How that works and which tools can help you, that's something I'm going to discuss today with Jan. But before we dive into the topic at hand, just some quick housekeeping. As you can see, this is a live webinar, so you can ask questions on the right-hand side. Just drop them into the comment section, whether you are joining us on YouTube or LinkedIn or here on the Riverside platform itself. We'll weave your comments into the conversation. So if you have any questions for me or for Jan or surrounding the tool, or just want to share your own struggles or recognize something, please do so, and we'll have an interesting chat with you there. Then also we're doing a recording, so it's not just a live session. If you have to leave early, that's no problem at all. We'll be sharing the recording with everyone afterwards, and we'll publish it on our website as well. With that out of the way, we do see a huge new challenge when it comes to the practical application of AI. I think everyone is playing around with AI nowadays, and it has outgrown, I would say, the interesting entertainment phase where everyone is just trying to create new poems or songs or interesting deepfakes of themselves in historical contexts. I don't know. That used to be a thing. I don't see that a lot now. But that was the entertainment phase of AI, and it's still there. It has an important role, but we're getting towards the practical application. And I think what we've seen many companies struggle with, and something actually even proven by some research. I think there was an article in The Economist saying that 90% of AI initiatives fail to deliver a positive return on investment in 2025. I do think that we're going to see a huge shift away from that in 2026 into the positive space. And there's two trends, I would say, that help in this regard. One is the agentic revolution. I think the November launch of Opus 4.6, I think, and Claude Cowork and Claude Code specifically meant that there was suddenly a true use case, a true practical application beside the whole content generation stuff. You could now have AIs use computers and do things in processes without instructing it and configuring it and basically asking users to be a proto developer. And the other bit is people are starting to realize that to get a positive return on investment, you need good data. You need a solid data foundation. And that can be one that sits within your own organization. But, well, what you see in industries is you're communicating data, product data, all the time. So it does make sense to have an industry standard or maybe even an industry-wide single source of truth. That's why we have Jan here today. So maybe, Jan, if you could quickly introduce yourself, Covalo, and just take it away from there.
Thank you so much, Stefan. So yeah, my name is Jan. I'm one of the two co-founders of Covalo. We started as the search engine for chemical ingredient in the personal care segment. And over the last 7 years, we saw how things were getting more complicated. That was not just about making the data available to everyone in one unified platform, but really about making the right data available to the right person, at the right place, and at the right time. And we've grown to become the data backbone for the industry. But yeah, we'll tell you a bit more on this in a second.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm curious is you went from search to becoming more of the data layer.
Mm-hmm.
What made that shift happen? Like what did customers ask of you to make that shift happen? What insight drove that shift towards from maybe sort of applied to data, a tool applied to data, to actually the data layer itself?
So as we will see in a second, like one of the big problems that we face is that there is a massive information asymmetry in the industry. And the data is scattered around in different format, very difficult to use. And that is dramatically slowing down the ability of companies to bring product to market, to innovate, to adapt to the continuous change that we have in the market. And so each time we talk to customers, data was actually always like one of the key pain points. They saw the value in the marketplace, but they were struggling to maintain their data up to date. They saw the value, but they still first wanted to address the problem internally. We also we received a grant around 3 years ago for like a recommendation engine for sustainable alternative. We're very excited, started working with some of the leading universities in Switzerland, and technology was not as advanced as today, but we could already do quite a lot. The results were, however, very underwhelming. And the main problem for this was also, again, the lack of standardized data, deep data to run this kind of assessment. And a lot of people, when they look at AI, they get very excited about the potential of the technology. They invest in those pilots that you were mentioning, like fail in 95% of the cases. And when you talk to people, you realize that the output was not good enough. And we always say trash in, trash out. And although data is probably not the most exciting topic as such, right? It is really the very foundation of every workflows and AI application that you are building today. And we really feel today that the industry and companies realize this more and more. They started with internal initiative. They had to go through that struggle. And I feel like in 26, there was really a turning point where people understand, okay, this is actually a mission critical topic that need to be addressed.
What I think is interesting, Jan, is when I look at the personal care industry, cosmetic industry, pharmaceuticals aligned, it feels like, oh, this is heavily regulated. These people have their shit in order, if I can say that. So you would expect that these big companies, that these big organizations would have had that all in place, right? So why would they need a solution like Covalo if they already have everything? They already have that solution in place. They have everything. They have their books in order, so to speak.
But that different element to it. So a lot of companies have a lot of data. So this is not the matter, but you have different driving forces that usually make things quite complicated. A lot of companies have a global presence and data is scattered across different sites, different geographies. You have a lot of M&A activities where suddenly you need to incorporate the data from a different company into your system, and those migrations are quite complicated. You have companies that have their data in order, but then they need to integrate with the systems of their customers, of partners that use a completely different data model and ontology. And so as soon as you want the data to flow across systems, flow outside of the company, that's where a lot of companies start to face difficulties. And if we look now specifically on the topic of AI needs a lot of context. So even if you have a lot of data internally, you need now to enrich this data with different information, can be market insight, can be regulatory information, and so on, to really be able to build this agentic layer. And so it's not only about having the data, it's about being able to enrich, harmonize this data, but then also make sure that the data flows beyond your company.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think the problem is clear, right? And yes, it is the case in the personal care industry. I think it's the same in other industries. And I think what we are seeing with our customers is that everyone is trying to get to this data foundation, right? And I think, well, before all our jobs are going to be replaced by AI, which I don't think is going to happen, but before that happens, we still have a lot of work to do in the data infrastructure, data cleansing, data solution space. So I wouldn't be out of a job for quite a while. We see a lot of our customers trying to build that while they're flying the plane, right? They've seen, the AI fail last year. They know that this is coming, or at least the front runners know that this is coming. And to really get to it, you need to have that data foundation in place.
Mhm.
We see a lot of requests now coming to help them build that data foundation, the
Mhm.
process, the architecture, the IT architecture, the tooling, the data. It all needs to come together in that sense, and before you can leverage that. And in that sense, it's an interesting time to be working with data, where finally maybe we are vindicated in the garbage in is garbage out, and finally people are trying to really fix the garbage that is coming in. How do you see that from your perspective?
I mean, we had recently like an investor meeting, and they delve also in the Jevons paradox, where it was the more a technology can drive efficiency, the more possibilities you have. So it's actually drive job adoption, it's drive economical growth, and so on. What is clear is the type of skills that are required are quite different. And so you go from, that's what we discussed before, from doing the job to orchestrating the job, from doing the job to reviewing things. And the amount of data that is currently being generated is huge. And as we briefly discussed before the start of the webinar, is this is cluttering ultimately the system. If the data is not good, if you don't revise it and you just, you know, populate data, that AI use AI generated data as a source for the AI generated content and so on, it becomes really difficult. So to have like strong data governance, strong data system is important. And then the last part is not just to improve the output of those models, it's also a question of cost. All the data, you know, the PIM vendor workshop webinar version 5.6 that I will never look at again, that sits somewhere in our server. Now you have AI run through all the presentation, including the ones that are not relevant, and it has a massive cost, right? So it's not only about having your data in order, it's about also how do you cleanse your data, how do you manage versions. There are so many considerations to drive efficiency and performance.
The interesting thing is, I never heard customers talk about data lineage or data governance before this year. And now suddenly everyone is talking about getting that in place. And I think what is interesting is that you don't always need a new solution to manage that well, right? It's also just getting the existing data in order. Usually better, newer solutions help getting that in order in a more AI-enabled fashion. But even without changing the IT architecture, which moves at a more glacial pace than, well, especially the world of AI, in which fundraisings are topping each other every other day, and new models get released every week, and like it's very difficult to keep up. Your IT architecture is definitely not keeping up, but there are some solutions you can take on all the levels. Like, yes, you can add tools to that IT architecture to bridge the full digital transformation, but you can also change the process and change the data and try to get that in order. And suddenly people are talking to me about data governance, right? That has never happened. That has never happened before. It usually was us trying to explain what data governance was. But hey, but that's definitely changing. And I think people are starting to realize how important it is, not just indeed from a hallucination data quality perspective, not from a cost perspective, as you also mentioned. That's both very important drivers. I think also some companies reported that they burned their AI budgets in the first months for the whole of 2026. So yes, it is an actual problem. Yeah. So how do you see the market, and how does Covalo solve these issues?
There are a lot of points to cover, but I think it has been very cheap to experiment because it was also highly subventioned. We already saw the cost of Claude on average increasing by 3x from March to May. And now that those companies are getting listed, investors will also look at fundamentals and not just the growth prospect, right? So it will become more and more expensive, and we see also companies scaling back the use of AI, like even Microsoft and other companies rehiring entry-level jobs to do some of it because AI became very expensive. And so, yeah, the cost element and the performance, and basically not just doing something because we can, but doing it because it makes sense and this is the best solution, right? Um, you can you can build, for example, a spaceship. You will not take the spaceship to go grocery shopping, right? And now we are still at the stage where people are just using AI for absolutely everything. And the latest, most advanced model to rename a file or to ask about their holidays in Mallorca. And I think that the awareness of the environmental and token costs of those requests based on the model and the complexity of the task is still pretty low. And this will hopefully also then evolve in the coming months. So for us, where we see is like we cannot fight the large language model race. This is like for the big tech companies to lead on. But for us, it's really about understanding what are those use cases where the technology can really deliver the most value, and try to build the leanest model, those very narrow model, not large models, that can very reliably and efficiently like solve these problems. And this is something that resonates with our customers more and more as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you that just throwing the tool at a problem usually doesn't solve the problem, right? It's basically, I think maybe as humans we all have to start there, right? Make those mistakes. So we're all going through that learning phase. But what you're saying is true. It is about I would say, considered approach towards improving all of the different levels in which AI is going to touch your organization with the right setup and the right tooling. So whether that is on the product data itself, whether that is on the relationships between different products, whether that is on the way you make it available, the different APIs and the different MCP connections that you make available or want to have, and the finally the architectural foundation on which it all rests. But I think most people are still stuck in the first layer where it's about the descriptions and the actual product data quality and making sure that all the attributes are filled, right? For example, and copy pasting in ChatGPT or in Claude to get a new or better description. I was at a conference last week, where this was exactly my feeling, where the talks were talking and the speeches were all about, like, say, level 2 and level 3, right? Making the right APIs available, making sure you had the right relations and the right context available for your AIs, which is important. The customers and users and were all still very much stuck in the description and level 1 attributes of product data and AI application. And no one was talking about the infrastructure and the sort of bigger shift that needs to happen in the, maybe the AI enablement space. But it's, as I said, it's an interesting world. It is a huge shift. I think it has been happening for a while now, right? It's 3 years since ChatGPT launched, but I think we've hit an accelerant last November with the agentic transformation revolution, and a lot of companies have been trying to play catch up, I think, since that period. We haven't seen the end of it yet, but I'm curious, what your vision is on where this might take us.
I think like the business fundamentals don't change, right? The technology is just a tool. That is one way to solve problems. And like with any new technology or concept, people first test, validate. Once you have like some kind of product market fit or problem fit, then you try to optimize, then and scale. And I think like the infrastructure topic becomes much more relevant or central to people's reflection the moment they enter that scaling and optimization phase, right? So we are probably still at an early stage of that process.
Yes.
um, yeah, and I think we all go through the same, right? You take like, okay, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 euro a month budget to experiment. You realize that certain things don't work. You understand where you can deliver value, where you can't, what is consuming a lot, what is not. And all of these are variables to ultimately optimize your setup and the use of the technology. But most companies are still early in that process.
I fully agree with you. Like it takes time, and people are starting to pay attention. I think that's the first step. Um, it's in that sense early days, but I do think that with the pace of change on that first level,
Mhm,
it's very difficult to keep up with like the more slower moving parts of the organization, like the process and people change management, and maybe even slower changes in the IT infrastructure level,
mhm,
and trying to keep that all in sync, and making sure you are not being left behind,
yeah,
where developments are very quick on that AI level. I don't know where the world is going to go, but I do think that you need to start moving with the whole organization. So also you need to have a vision on that IT architectural level if you want to make sure that you're still relevant, right?
mhm,
In 3 to 5 years, and probably you'll be able to stick it out that long, even if you don't invest in that layer or in the API layers or MCP layers. Um, but you will be um, left behind if you don't start doing that now.
mhm,
And I think even if you're not able to change that layer now, it is time to look at solutions where you can bridge between today and the day after tomorrow, maybe. So you need a solution for tomorrow as well.
mhm.
Maybe if you would like to, Jan, could you share your presentation with your vision on how you see that for the personal care market, and the problems that you see there, and how that fits into this AI revolution happening right
Sure.
now?
So let's probably just start at the basics. So a lot of the presentation will be related to the personal care chemical industry. That is the industry that we operate in, and why it actually makes sense to have an industry specific but also industry wide solution to address some of the toughest challenges. So on a daily base, we're using on average 12 different personal care products. Right? So if you take a cream like this one and you turn it around, you have like a list of ingredients, and you typically have 15 to 50 ingredients in that formulation. And the formulators creating that product typically need up to 200 data points throughout the process to create that product. And they need this for every single one of these ingredients. So it is really very, very complex. So it takes today anything between 1 and 5 years to bring a product to market from scratch. And here you see a bit the process from like suppliers start by creating ingredients that tend to be distributed by distributors. And then those ingredients are being scouted, qualified by the different brands. You have all the formulation, testing, manufacturing processes. And it's a very long process until the product hit the market. When it does, we estimate to more than 50% the number of product launches that fail. Right? So if we look at the wider consumer good industry, that's an estimated lost investment of more than 500 billion, which is quite huge. The main reason those products fail is because they fail to adapt fast enough to new regulation. They fail to adapt fast enough to consumer demand change. They fail to adapt fast enough to supply chain disruption. They have an idea that is in a blue ocean, and by the time they launch, it's already a saturated market. Right? So speed to market is really of the essence to remain relevant, but also to address some of the sustainability challenges and bring more innovative product to market. And things are just about to get much worse. So we have a lot of new regulation that come into place. We have the EU Green Deal. We have a lot of other regulation in Europe, in the US, in China. And we estimate that today more than 80% of the existing products will need reformulation. So simply put, the companies that are not able to adapt fast enough will simply disappear.
But then, Jan, you should have started today, right? So if it takes 1 to 5 years, you should have started yesterday. It's 2026 now. Yeah, you need that time to be ready by 2030.
Yes, and the urgency is there. So I mean, you need to start now. Is if you stick to the old process, right, which is what companies do. What we want to offer is a better way of doing things to really shorten that time to market and basically be able to address those challenges much faster. What we see is that companies have system where data is, but if we take big companies like on the brand side, which are on the left side, they have different systems for R&D, for procurement, for sustainability. Those systems don't always talk to each other. And then each time they need to collect information on one of these ingredients, believe it or not, they still rely on email exchange with suppliers to collect the data. And every single one of the brand on the left side will be requesting the same data from the supplier on the right side. So this is incredibly inefficient. Data is fragmented in different format, often not up to date. And that completely limit and hinder the adoption of AI, but also in general, like the ability for these companies to collaborate and innovate together.
But just to confirm, Jan, I see some big brand names on that slide. These guys still don't have that nailed down either, right? Like it's
No, they don't. So sometimes they will be forcing it's always a bit of a power balance. So sometimes they will ask their suppliers to input the data in their system. But this is not solving the problem. It's delegating it to a partner or to a weaker party. They are all the problem is a lot of these companies try to solve it on their own, but by doing so, they contribute to the market fragmentation, right? And what we need is really to bring the industry together on one common backbone that will basically address the internal need that offer the right security, but is addressing this information asymmetry on an industry level. I came across this study from BCG, so I recreated the slide with Claude here, but it was interesting to see that the chemical industry and the personal care industry in general is really at the bottom of the ranking when it comes to AI maturity. And what they saw was that AI maturity correlates strongly with the data infrastructure and the ability of companies to build workflows around. So the industry is data rich. It's not the problem is not about not having data. You can always discuss that you can better keep data, better collect data, but in general, there is a lot of data. One of the biggest problem is really this digital fragmentation. So we have a partnership with one of the largest fair organizers in the world called In Cosmetic, and we always run infographic. And that was in April. We asked the industry, so people passing by, what was stopping their team to scale AI, right? And what we see is the number one bottleneck is the lack of complete and reliable data internally, but also data from partners, data from the market. The second thing that we see is that people don't just need an extra system, they need support, they need expert, because they're lacking that expertise in-house, right? And in an AI race, the top talent that have that expertise are quite difficult to get, and the upskilling and the change management required for an internal team is quite difficult. The last part is that is also holding people and companies back from investing more in the technology is still big concerns about data sovereignty, the compliance and security. And so connecting your systems now to a lot of AI system and the data being trained on it and so on is still something many companies are not comfortable with. They might be comfortable to use it on a shallow level, but leveraging the technology on their most precious data is something that many companies are still not ready to do.
Yeah.
So how do we address this? Number one, we offer a vertically focused solution. That means that when you have like a traditional PIM solution, you optimize for modularity. You want to be able to address everything, and that requires usually a lot of time. It's quite slow. So we have a solution that really is catered to the need of the industry, and that we can deploy more than 20 times faster than a regular system. And that also means that there are some cost advantages to it. The second, when you don't have that vertical focus, if you have 1 or 1,000 customers, it doesn't really make the experience of every single one of these customers better. For us, every company that we onboard is improving the network effect that we have, the data flows. So we help you be more connected within that industry. Vertical focus also means that everything we do is relevant for the industry. The partnership for go-to-market, the data partnership, solution partnerships, to basically collect additional data, to collect more context, but also then make sure that this data flow in the right places. We discussed earlier also that it's not just about having the data, right? So what you don't want is if someone asks what is the best moisturizer, that you recommend the product promoted as the best moisturizer. What you want is to have the expertise and the ontology to basically help people make sense objectively of the data. So to say, for example, you would look at a hydration index or something that is an objective measure of performance to provide this insight. And this is something you can only do when you have a certain focus. And when you put all of this together, ultimately what we see is when people address this data foundation with this intelligence layer and that connectivity, it helps them build their AI readiness. So by investing into this, they will make everything else much cheaper. So very briefly, by connecting everyone, we basically end the system. We address the data fragmentation layer. We also help it standardize it. We make the maintenance much easier. So instead of having to send an update to every single partner, you update it centrally, then the information flows to the different partners. And we can now gradually build the workflows on it and therefore foster greater collaboration. So the mission of the company is really ultimately to help the industry be more innovative and sustainable by connecting it into a unified process. As we saw before, you don't have a single cosmetic product without ingredients. So that's really where everything started. And that's what you see a bit in this bottom right corner. We started collecting the information from thousands of suppliers, integrating in their system, extracting data from documents, offering them a PIM Lite version initially to edit the data directly into our systems. The data flows into our data platform. Now we are enriching this data with more context, with regulatory data, toxicology data, market intelligence data to really make sense out of this ingredient data and help people use it. And then we also help brands and other companies provide the internal context. So for example, how these ingredients are being used, where they're being used, who they're working with. And all of this is managed in that data platform, which is in a certain way that industry-wide PIM system. So we standardize, normalize, maintain that data here. Companies can control who can view that data and where. So everything is managed centrally. And then that data then flow in across the ecosystem. So we started with a marketplace where we have today a bit more than 6,000 brands and 35,000 users using the platform, connected to more than 1,500 ingredient manufacturers. What we noticed there was that we were facilitating mostly new business relationship. But if you look at established players, they generate more than 80% of their revenue from existing customers and their distributors. And that data was still a big challenge for them to share. And that's how we moved to that customer pool offering, where we have now customers like Givaudan, Simrise. We have multi-segments companies like Schwimmer Schwarz. We have some distributors. And there we really went deep into their internal data, more sensitive information, commercial data that they can share internally with their vetted partners. But also now, for example, if you have a product that is slightly adjusted for L'Oreal, that they can share this product only with them and not have like only generic version of this product.
Yeah. But I think, Jan, if you have that data foundation in place, the interface really, I mean, it does matter for the daily user, but how they interface with that data, whether that is through an AI agent or whether that is an API or a portal, it doesn't really matter as long as they have that access to that foundation, that data foundation.
Yeah, and I think like we see a move away from a UX UI heavy experience to a more data centric and connected system, right? So this is changing quite a lot. We still need to navigate a bit that transition because the way people engage with products, the experience they have, right, the emotion, the visual elements, especially when you talk about beauty product, there is a lot that still requires some visual element. So we need to be a bit selective on this, but the more we go into the workflows, the more we go into the scouting, the qualification, the management of ingredients, the less this part becomes relevant, the more the data flows are really the core of it.
Yeah. And what do you hear from customer, like the previous slide where you say sort of where you see the Covolo solution sitting in between as the broker or the single data foundation in between. It makes sense to have a streamlined process and have that data foundation in place. But what do you hear from prospects or potential customers or even actual customers where they say like, why isn't the whole industry already on Covolo?
I think it's always a chicken and egg problem. And when you are in an industry that needs to deal with environmental hazard, very long processes that have very heavy like system, like when you invest 150 million into a new plant that will be ready in 15 years, you have a different mindset than in the digital environment where everything goes very quick. So people tend to act a bit more cautiously. You don't have so many trendsetters. You have a lot of smart followers. And so that's what ultimately was probably one of the challenges for us, was to initiate those network effect to really be able to attract the users and basically give a reason for suppliers to share their data, to engage, to be responsive, which I will cover in the next slide. Probably just to wrap up on this one, what we see is that once we have the ingredient data, then now we are really working closer with the brands that need to use this data, right? So if you remember that product development process, once you have the data, then start the real flow of information. And there what we're working on is really helping these companies align their marketing, R&D, regulatory, procurement, sustainability team by reflecting all their requirements in one consolidated interface, and then avoid also those internal back and forth to vet ingredients and maintain information. So we streamline that process quite dramatically. And then ultimately, with all the data that we consolidate on ingredient, the internal context, the third-party data, then this is the foundation that we are now building those AI agents that, as mentioned earlier, not broad agents, but very focused agents. So that will do data extraction from documents, that will do regulatory checks, that will do some toxicology assessment. So there are a lot of use cases that companies need to continuously do, that need to be reliable, and that can run very efficiently. And that will be the focus of the company moving forward. So if we talk about the network effects, as said, we started with the data that was initially quite shallow. So it was good for commercial data, but probably not for more formulation topics. that still allowed us to attract users, that generated traffic and analytics for the suppliers, which made them more responsive and to help them engage into the marketplace. That improved the data quality because they were seeing the value of sharing more information to get more qualified requests from customers. And then as this loop reinforced, we started to onboard customers on the private portals that I described earlier, which again meant that we went from being like just a data consolidation platform to really becoming the source of truth for many of these companies. So that improve again the data depth, but also the how accurate this data was. And then as we have this, a lot of the players are across multiple segments. So although the marketplace and the network effect are focused on the personal care consumer good industry, it allows us to gradually expand into other segment and better address the need of that industry. And so now we started the project almost 8 years ago, first within like a large Swiss chemical company client. And when we saw that the vision was the right one, but a lot of companies wouldn't engage with us because client was one of their competitor. We did a management buyout, took the project out. And now in this independent setup, we're able to gradually grow. And we see that those network effects now are really kicking in. We were able the last 2 years to grow 3x. We have a global coverage, so still very strong in Europe, but still with users in more than 145 countries. And it is very central to us to not put anything in place that would hinder those network effects, so hinder the data collection, hinder the usage. So that's why the marketplace itself is completely free of use for users, and also the listing of ingredients. And then what we will be monetizing is really more that advanced workflows and agentic layer moving forward.
What I'm wondering, Jan, is how can I'm in this operating in this industry, and there's lots of regulations and needs to be lots of data to be shared and lots of validations and documents. How can I make sure that I can trust the data coming from your platform?
Mm-hmm. This is a big topic. So at the beginning and still now, the data broadly come from the supplier. So it's a highly regulated industry. So companies that want to sell in the industry need to go through different steps to get registered, to also get the right certifications and so on. So the data quality is in general better than in other industries, but it's still not always 100% reliable or vetted. And this is becoming like an increasing focus of ours of how can we put guardrails in place to vet the data, ensure it's always up to date, but also leverage the collective intelligence of those 35,000 users and a growing number to also report inaccuracies, report mistakes, and to collectively also improve that data quality. So we really want to not only build a system for the industry, but we want to create like a movement on the industry level where everyone can contribute to make it more efficient, more accurate, and not keep everything in an intransparent way and internally, but really to be the guardian of the system, but then allow everyone to contribute to it.
Yeah. Now, what I'm wondering, because you've been on this journey for quite some time now, in this specific niche, well, the interesting thing for me is the high complexity of the industry and the regulatory pressure already. I think some industries are almost catching up with the DPP and the PPWR, the packaging regulatory environment happening now. This industry was already much further along, but they were still doing things the old-fashioned way. If you've been in this space now for 5 years, would you, knowing what you know now, would you maybe start in a different industry, maybe building a vertically integrated PIM data pool, or would you still pick personal care?
Hmm. I mean, like the blessing and the curse of having started in a global company is that we started globally. So we were when we spun off, we were already in 120 countries, right? Um, and as one of our investors say, you can't be everyone's darling. so, so you end up doing a lot of things and not always perfectly. And what we see is there's this data broker concept that, so like if you have data, you're a bit like the yellow pages. It's very convenient, but no one is paying for it. Then you need to turn this data into insights to have already a first value creation. And then when you turn this insight into recommendation, and then ultimately this recommendation into innovation and actual product, then that's where you generate the most value. And to go along that journey very fast, there is value in being more focused. So I don't know if I would pick a different industry, but I would probably not try to cover all ingredients from the start. I would probably have started on one specific ingredient category, where the sense of urgency was quite high. So, where regulatory changes or sustainability drive would have created that sense of urgency to act, and then validate the concept, and then gradually expand to other ingredient segments within the industry. Because as we discussed with AI, you can do everything, and with the data we have, we can do a lot of things. So the key challenge is really focus, and not get distracted with the 100 possibilities, but really identify the area where you will be able to maximize the impact with the minimum effort or with the highest speed.
Yeah. It's interesting that you started as a global company. It makes sense from the industry perspective, but I think what we see with many data pools or data sharing initiatives or even PIM solutions is that they are very much local and very much stay local. So even though it is a uh, big elephant to swallow, maybe to start global, and you can never do it right, and it's a process you're building every day. It does mean that you don't shoot yourself in the foot or focus too much on just a small geography and are later then bound by just the small geography. I think the global scope makes sense, and not just from an industry perspective, but also from a AI and global development perspective. Like this is going to, yeah, happen in a global environment, not in a local environment, and it would have artificially kept you small. And I do think, yes, small is focused, as you said. And you also need to focus. Maybe that's also an important lesson. But some areas you have to focus, and maybe on a sort of geographical ambition, it is the right decision to start global and not start local.
Absolutely. And I mean, like today, if I look at some of our most valuable partnership or customers, they all came because of that global footprint and that coverage, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like it's a level of complexity that is superior. It requires a lot more effort to probably at the very beginning, not the highest return on investment, but it really set a foundation on which we can today build that intelligence layer. And there we can be very focused, right? So we have that data coverage, we have the network effect already operating, we collect more data, we drive engagement, we onboard new companies. And now we start to go on that very solid and healthy foundation, start to build those more vertically focused agents and workflows. And that is really what is building the stickiness and the value for customers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, maybe before we wrap up, Jan, like if maybe you cannot start again tomorrow, but if you look at the industry, where should they have started yesterday, or where can they start tomorrow, and where should they go and find more information about you and your product if they have any follow-on questions?
It's a good one. I mean, like in general, I think to be at the right place at the right time, you need to be too early. Otherwise, you're too late. It's always as a company about not being way too early and dying just before your time has come, right? So I think for us it was good to be a bit early, and we got supported by COVID initially, that made people realize that physical interactions won't always happen, and that you can have disruption and that you can do things differently. Now, if I look, a lot of companies still want to, they're still very inward focused. So they always look at the internal problem, and there is still a very big drive for control. So they want to have the perfect system that is tailored to their processes and so on, not realizing that it actually makes it extremely inflexible, and flexibility is key today. They don't realize that they are collectively slowing down the industry by fragmenting it. And so where the industry should have started a couple of years ago, when the chemical industry in general stopped outperforming other industries, which was the case for 30, 40 years, was to or really look at, okay, how can we join forces to make the industry as a whole more attractive, right? Have that tide that lift all boats, instead of operating in divided conquer. So this is taking time. We see now momentum across academia and regulators and so on to go in that direction. You have like different coalitions. You have the Big Corp coalition. You have the Eco Beauty Score consortiums. You have a lot of initiatives. So it's slowly going into the right direction. But we still need now to connect all these initiatives. We need to have that technology backbone to really bring it to life. And that's the type of vision and commitment that senior leaders need to make to really make things work.
Yeah, well, and that's a great place to start, Jan. I think in a way, if they would have solved the problem, they wouldn't have needed you, right? So in a way, it is good that they haven't solved this themselves. But I also agree with you that yeah, it is an industry-wide problem. It does take industry-wide initiatives. Covalo is part of that industry-wide developments, but it must come from more sources than just the market, so to speak, and it needs to be carried internally in those organizations as well. Maybe AI is going to be the forcing function if the lower return on investments were not the forcing function a few years back. Maybe AI is going to be that. In any case, I would love to keep exploring together with you where that ship ends up in 6 months, maybe a year. Let's check in then. And I would say thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights. I want to thank the audience for joining us today as well. And if you want to follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube, please do. If you want to see the full recording, keep an eye out on LinkedIn and also our website, pimvendors.com, where we'll be posting a recap of our conversation later this week. As for now, I would say thanks, Jan. Speak to you soon. And for the audience, thanks for sticking around, and see you in the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.